please help me give a warm welcome to Mr. Charles Li.
Thank you.
Charles, it's good to see you. So
Great.
I've known Charles since I got here in 2011. I arrived on the shores of Hong Kong as a foreign correspondent, and you were one of the leaders. You remain one of the leaders. It has been my privilege to track the story of Hong Kong exchange and really the story of a broader Hong Kong economy. So we find ourselves here almost, and you look just as young as I remember the first time.
Thank you.
And how have things been? The past decade has truly been extraordinary.
Yes.
And now we find ourselves almost at a crest. It's not just Hong Kong. It's London with Brexit. It's America. It's across Europe. It's really across Asia. So these winds of change, this era of disruption, how are you thinking about maintaining the vision of Hong Kong exchange and continuing to try to buffet those winds of change?
Yeah, I think our strategy has been quite simple. In this very, volatile and increasingly polarized world where America and China, the two economic powers of the new era, are increasingly going separate ways. But the world is already so connected. Technology is so global that this artificiality of separation it's going to hurt everybody, hurt the new generation who came to this world essentially believing that we are living in a global village. So I think our role in Hong Kong, in particular in financial services, is to try to see whether we can't control this polarization, we can't control this divorce, but we can be the strong link between these two centers of gravity and essentially play the role of connecting them either by system or either by people or either by technology, and focusing on what we do as exchange, which is really pricing of money, and everything ultimately is about money, and ultimately no matter what you do, how polarized you are, it's all about financial services, it's all about money, and so our strategy is simple. We anchored in China, we connecting the world, and we enable technology, and technology empowered, because increasingly the key connectivity is technology.
Money can also be politicized.
Yes.
And there's also two sides of any story. You can agree with the trend that is being defined and politicized, or you can serve the markets that simply want to get about the work of making money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes one supersedes the other and affects the other. How do you, I guess, play moderator? How do you serve the markets that want to participate but are perhaps scared to or recognize that there might be some blowback politically? How do you moderate that tension?
Yeah, we can't really dictate politics. We can't really influence politics much. But at the end of the day, no matter what is the political system, what is the political ideology that are dividing our societies and our communities, all countries and regions, I think the exchange, by definition, is the exchange, of money, exchange of value, exchange of ideas, and exchange ultimately of value creativity. So I think different systems now are no longer easily capable to be connected. The Chinese financial services, for example, is very, very different from the global system, and increasingly the Chinese technology system and technology governance is increasingly different from the global standard. And in many ways, China could potentially overpass in many areas. So what we wanted to do is to make sure that to the extent Chinese capital wanting to go to global investment, we find a way to make it happen. And conversely, international capital that continue to want to be investing into China, we are able to help the two systems continue to talk, to make sure the round pipes and square pipes are able to be connected. But in the end, we also need to recognize that technology is going to play very different roles in China and on the global scale. And in many ways, technology could be the key differentiation and the key differentiator of China potentially surpassing. And we wanted to make sure that we stay on the forefront of those key changes.
So this is a story that has been widely reported. It is a story that we at Forecast News have covered. Xi Jinping on October 24th of this year remarked that blockchain is going to be one of the pillars of economic growth and wants to focus on that. That is one example of really recognizing technology as innovating China to the rest of the world. How are you thinking about these technologies? How are you thinking about being at the forefront of it? What are the things that you're working on right now that perhaps we're not seeing because your teams are working behind the scenes? But give us a little clue.
Yeah, I think on a very small scale, everybody talk about blockchain. Everybody think of the potential. We start by thinking initially on a smaller scale, what part of our business today that we are able to explore blockchain that really give us a better sense as to its true implication, its true application, and its true potential. So the one area of blockchain that we're currently actively working on is the northbound stock connect with Shanghai and Shenzhen. As you know, the two financial systems are very different. One key difference is that if you have an account, if you want to trade Chinese domestic Asia market, their system is that you have to have money in your account or you have to have shares in your account before you are able to buy or sell. In the international market, we are a T+2 system, meaning you can make your investment decision right now. If you like the stock, you buy. If you don't like the stock, you can sell. And then the settlement happens 2 days later.
Yeah.
So you can come up, when you execute your trade, then if you sell, then you can go and try to find the shares in 2 days to settle with Hong Kong Exchange. Or if you want to buy, you can give me money in 2 days. That's the global system. It's easier, it's more efficient, and people don't have to really move money right away. They are able to make the economic trading decision before they have to do all the back office physical settlement. China is different. China, you have to have the resources in the account, either money or security, before you can transact.
They don't want to chase you.
So the northbound of Stock Connect, all the global investors who are used to T+2, but who have to trade in China, and their back office sometimes just, it's so difficult for them to move shares before the trader make up their mind. It's so different. So in order to comply with the China's pre-funded approach, a lot of people have to work very hard the night before the trading happens. So it's creating very big challenges, especially different time zones and different back office talking to each other. So we are using blockchain essentially on that pre-funding requirement so that global investors, if I do something, everybody knows that I already done my part and I don't have to wake up at night. And then you do your part and then 6, 7, 8 parties are able to do it together. So we're using that in that very narrow sense. But reflecting on President Xi's overall strategy in China on blockchain, I think we are working to understand it better. I think what we're really seeing is that China is likely going to develop a fundamentally different economic governance structure than globally. Globally, blockchain really do two things. One, establishing trust and confidence. Two, it's much cheaper than existing technology, which require everybody to back up with data storages and confirmation. Where blockchain, everybody can agree to one way of ledger recording. Why that is going to really make a big difference in China vis-a-vis globally? Globally, the market are very established. There is trust. People trust the exchange, people trust the banks, people trust the regulator, people trust custodians. So as a result, blockchain is very difficult to be implemented in the established, mature economy to replace the incumbent system because there's just so much resistance and so much vested interest, and that there is no real fundamental need other than some new areas, maybe in Africa, maybe in Venezuela, when public trust already disappeared or never existed. But in the Western world, it's very hard to think blockchain is going to fundamentally quickly replace the current way of doing things. But in China, it's slightly different. The government is very powerful, has tremendous influence over the economic decisions of all the economic players in the country. But the incumbent system, whether it's retail, financial services, commodity trading, and logistics, trading, all of this are highly, traditional services are very bad, and the current system are all organized pretty much digitalized, whether it's Taobao, whether it's all the logistics. Today in China, if you buy something, it's on the way, you are able to track exactly what that particular merchandise is at any given time. So in many ways, the economy with such a highly digitalized form, with pretty much cashless already, is very prime for a very new way of organizing economic governance. Because if, the trust and the confidence is there because the government is so powerful. But on the other hand, if the economy can be organized through technology, then the government doesn't have to build massive amount of bureaucracy, massive amount of regulatory forces, massive amount of different trust-given institutions like the West did. Maybe China can have very little distance between the authority and the ability to execute that authority. So the whole economy actually is organized on blockchain, for example, but ultimately it's not the blockchain that gives people the confidence that everything is going to be fine. It is still the government, but blockchain gives the governments the ability, give the government the confidence that it doesn't require massive amounts of institutional forces to enforce the rules and enforce the contractual relationship between people. So I think if they do that, you could actually see an emergence in China of blockchain redefine economic relationship between people that ultimately are backed up by the sovereign faith and credit, but the actual execution of that sovereign faith and credit and trust is delivered on technology. And that giving the government a very easy way of really controlling the economy. Just look at the payment system.
Yeah.
With massive development in the private sector, not by the government, in Taobao, in Tencent, in Alibaba, in JD.com, all this digitalization of the economy that ultimately now created a payment system in China today that is completely digitalized. So the central government and central bank, simply PBOC said, okay, let's set up a payment system, and I'm going to be the big shareholder, and you guys can all become shareholder. So essentially, in some ways, physically nationalized the whole payment system, where in the West is all organized among different institutions, whether it's a SWIFT, whether it's all sorts of Visa and MasterCard and American Express credit card. All of this are private institutionally forced that by definition are very cumbersome, are very complex, are very competitive in nature, and China could potentially nationalize so many part of the economic governance model of that economy. And that probably is where blockchain, in my view, has the greatest promise of implementation. Doesn't mean that if you're a blockchain company, you're going to make zillions of dollars, because in the end, you just a simple technology making simple contractual relationship very apparent, allowing the government essentially saying, okay, government says you win, you lose, but how the government enforced it, how the government made that decision, is the technology giving the government the confidence, rather than in a society in the fundamentalist view of blockchain, that is all the technology that is giving everybody the trust.
Yeah.
I think ultimately we could get there, but China will get there by combining a strong central governance model by the government, strong government, implementing technologically a blockchain governance model that allow the economy to be pretty much digitalized and blockchained, so that it becoming extraordinarily visible, and then giving all participants a particular way of looking at the transactions. Obviously, you argue if that model goes to the extreme, and then one day everybody say, who needs the government, right? But that will be probably years and decades away, but I do see China's economy, because of its backwardness historically, because of the lack of resistance by vested interests and incumbent players, is able actually to take the next stage and to supersede and overpass a much more current system that works wonderfully, tremendously efficient, but is heavily populated by layers and layers of institutions that have huge interest to keep the status quo.
I mean, you're talking about the leapfrog effect of emerging technology. So not only China, but also Vietnam, Thailand, and all of the surrounding sovereigns in this region also see the potential of emerging technology to leapfrog into the next system. So it really kind of creates two systems, two global systems, if this scenario is playing out. And I absolutely agree, the kind of reporting that we're doing in China when it comes to blockchain, we are seeing that in terms of the ability to advance technology very, very quickly, 1.4 billion people market. Okay, having said that, Hong Kong Exchange is anchored in China, thinking about the global strategy anchored in China to the world. And so you're going to have to be very well versed in technology. You understand the legacy system of the West. You're going to have to translate that to a new emerging and evolving digital system that's going to likely begin in China, spread throughout the region. And so what kind of conversations are you having in China with that leadership, having an understanding of how those economic structures and architecture is going to, that you're going to have to be very sensitive to and aware of?
Yeah, I mean, it's not our choice and it's not our preference to see the world becoming different. Fundamentally, even just 5 years ago, we thought the world is one global village, is becoming smaller and smaller, everybody doing things in exactly the same way. But I think now it is the American choice to be different, because I think somehow, allowing China to play in that is going to potentially giving China the edge. I think by being different, by excluding China, by trying to really create two sets of systems, that's not China's choices. I think American, in the short term, probably made it much more challenging for China to accelerate its growth, because it's not able to leverage on the connected, incumbent, strong success of the American technological advances to advance China's growth. But in the long term, I think that basically forced China to actually almost have to think about self-reliance, almost have to think that almost everything, whether it's GPS, whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's 5G, they have to find their own way. They cannot rely on that. If that happens, ultimately they will hurt everybody. But you will start to see the emergence of two systems. While it is not Hong Kong's preference, but that ultimately is Hong Kong's opportunity. When two big systems of this magnitude, China is the only one who can afford to be on its own because the market is so deep and so big that it actually can go its own ways. So with that two systems, that we are in the middle, and hopefully to be able to continue to be translated, continue to get the different voltages, 220 to 110 together. So in that regard, we obviously, the first thing we wanted to do is that we want to make sure that technology companies from China, from globally, anywhere, are able to receive capital, be funded. So our capital market reform is the most important in terms of technology companies coming to Hong Kong, either taking Chinese money, if you're an international technology company. I'm going to Israel next week. So there are a lot of international technology companies who wanted Chinese capital. All Chinese companies who want global capital. And this is the only place where both international and Chinese companies converge in Hong Kong, and also Chinese international capitals converge in Hong Kong. So that's point number one. Point number two, we are a big enabler and consumer and a customer of technology in, in organizing our own market. But our third, potentially the biggest and the most audacious and ambitious vision or dream is to build world's first data marketplace. You can call it data exchange, but we call it data marketplace. Essentially, we have high level of conviction that in the future, data can trade as a new asset class. So in fact, actually, today's financial trading is all about data, but we trade companies' data by trading companies' financials. Basically, all equity is about trading companies' financial data. All commodities is to trade the commodity supply and demand data. All fixed income and the currency, we trade the data of that sovereign country that issued that currency. So whether it's interest rate of US dollar, euro, yen, or renminbi. It's already data trading. But because of China, but that data trading is like a pyramid. We are now trading the tip, really the financial data that has been generated through accounting, through regulation, through disclosure. Ultimately, the financial data, we're trading your revenue, your costs, your earnings, your growth, and your balance sheet. Increasingly today, the financial industry are trading what we call the second tier is alternative data. These are the data that give you a sense of the economy, where it's going, satellite images, logistic data, trucking data, roads data, weather data. All this data in some ways have correlationship with the way money should be priced, companies should be priced, commodities should be priced. So that's called alternative data. So we're working very actively on that. First is called market data. Second is really alternative data. But China at the bottom could actually allow us to potentially consider trading basic economic data. This is basically, China is now a digitalized economy. Almost every person's single activity of every day is booked somewhere in a digital form.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, because we often talk about the latency of GDP data.
Yeah.
Okay? Happens every quarter, everybody expects it, everybody waits for it. Are you talking about real-time economic data?
Yeah.
So you're talking about, forget GDP, you're talking about real-time mass economic data that affects the price in milliseconds or
Absolutely.
even faster.
Yeah, for example, today, how do we price copper? We look at copper concentrate in the mines. We look at shipping of copper concentrate. We look at refining. We look at warehouses. We're all looking at supply of copper. And then we decide how copper should be priced in the commodity market.
Often a guess.
Yes, but China today, if you look at the data from Taobao, from JD.com, from Pinduoduo, from any of this data, every day, every moment, every second, you know how many refrigerators are sold in China, how many TVs is sold in China, how many air conditioners were sold in China. The copper components in those appliances are very defined, very clear. Maybe just 2 kilos of copper in an air conditioner. Whatever it is, so every day, every moment in China today, we know how much copper is being actually consumed by people who are purchasing the appliances. So maybe in the future, we can price copper by not only looking at the supply side of it, but looking at the demand side of it. Another example, oil. Today, we price oil by looking at oil field, OPEC production, shipping, refining. Today in China, everybody's buying gasoline on your phone, buying a coupon which is volume discount. Why not in the future buy your gasoline by gallons? You actually, if you're a consumer, if you're a taxi fleet, if you're a taxi driver, and I like the gas prices today, I buy 700 gallons for the remainder of the year.
Well, airlines do that.
Yeah, you do that.
You can do it too.
That basically is a consumer making a decision on
yeah.
gasoline. And then later on, that coupon, second day, I need money. Oh, I don't like the gas prices anymore. I sell that coupon. If there is a spot market price for it, that can be the future trading of commodities of crude. So China is able to potentially going from bottom up, from the consumer side, and redefine global financial trading.
And back to this year, as chief executive of Hong Kong Exchange, how are you putting that war chest to work? We saw the bid for London Stock Exchange. Was that a clue as to your global strategy? And how are you moving forward in terms of how are you going to put your money to work? How are you going to put your investors' money to work?
Well, some people, when we bid for LSE, and saying 蛇吞象, like a snake taking an elephant, because they didn't know how big we are. They think we are a small entity taking a big company. No, we are a big company. We are a massive stock exchange on a global scale. We have been #1 for many years. Right now, we're #2, occasionally #3. So we're much bigger than most of the global exchanges, even though people think those are bigger exchanges, but we're bigger. So it's not, we have massive resources, we have a big war chest, but we're not going to buy everything just because we have money. What we wanted to do is to find ways to connect three things essentially. We want to connect physically trading our East with the West so that financial trading can happen under one watch over 18 hours spent. So connecting the West with the East. Second, connecting the old and the new. Either the old money buying new opportunities or new money buying old opportunities. Chinese money buying castles in Ireland, but old money buying Chinese new technology companies. So connecting money. So connecting market, #1, connecting money, #2, connecting data. Data I talked about, connect new data with old data. So that's the idea. That one didn't work. Something else may work. A big thing could work. A small thing could work. If we do a big thing, we spend a lot of money. We're really under a lot of pressure to deliver returns on that big money we spend. Or we can do successions of smaller deals. Smaller amount of money, quicker return, smaller return, but more transactions. So we are in the market. We will grow. We will grow by leveraging China. We will grow by leveraging globally. And we will grow by absolutely not only is the leader of technology, enablers of technology, customer of a technology, but ultimately trying to find a way to trade data and creating a new form of financial trading, evolving the new digitalized Asia economy.
The digitalization age is already upon us, and it is truly fascinating to hear how the head of Hong Kong Exchange is truly thinking about new markets and global strategy. Charles Li, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Charles. That was
Thank you.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Charles Li.